The agile hands of Dr. Nazih Zuhdi carefully placed a donor heart inside Nancy Rogers. Rogers was the first heart transplant patient in the Sooner State.
Still vivid in my mind are Dr. Zuhdi's confident steps in performing the miracle of the heart transplant. Even now, after almost 20 years and many hundreds of transplants later, and thousands of cardiac operations, the memory still gives me a thrill that is difficult to translate.
The success of the rare procedure would launch Integris Baptist Medical Center on a new path of medicine and secure the hospital's standing as a surgical leader. Some of the technology used 25 years ago is still used today. The process known as total intentional hemodilution played a major role in the success of Oklahoma's first heart transplant. The technique was developed by the head surgeon, Nazih Zuhdi, in 1960 while he was working at Mercy Hospital. Total intentional hemodilution is the priming of the heart-lung machine. It allows for open heart surgery without the use of blood transfusions or live donors. The principle went global, making open heart surgery available for all patients. While some doctors have attempted operations without the technique, most physicians still rely on it.
The results of procedures done so-called off-pump in the latest literature have actually not been as good. So there is a move back to doing almost all cardiac surgery on the heart-lung machine with hemodilution, and certainly for a transplant where the heart has to be totally removed, not using the heart-lung machine is not an option.
Dr. John Chafin is the Chief of Cardiac Transplantation at the Nazih Zuhdi Transplant Institute at Integris. He was part of Baptist's first heart transplant team and has seen several changes over the course of the past 2 decades.
When I first started doing this in 1985, if a patient got off the table, we were pretty pleased, and if they actually got out of the hospital after a cardiac transplant, we were ecstatic. Today, if they don't live 10 or 15 years, we're pretty disappointed. For the last year, we've had 100% survival.
The advancement of anti-rejection drugs has been vital to the success of heart transplant surgery.
It was not unusual early on in our first 10 to 20 to 30 transplants to have acute rejection, and that meant that basically within the first 12 to 24 hours the body would just have a violent rejection of the heart, and many of these patients didn't survive those violent rejections. In this day and age, it's extremely unusual.
Science and medicine have also improved the methods of retrieving a donor organ and preserving the organ before surgery.
The success of the procedure has gotten a lot more people involved in it. And I also remember in the early days, we did 5 or 6 transplants, and everyone at the hospital was going, well, that's fine, but that's probably all the people in Oklahoma that would ever need a transplant. Now we're well over 400 and still going, and still have, over 50 people on our list waiting for transplants and things. So certainly as it has become a more successful procedure, it's been a lot more people interested in it, and the more we do, the better we are at it, essentially.
In addition to improving the techniques and procedures in the operating room, surgeons are looking to mechanical engineering to help their patients.
The advances in the field of heart failure have been absolutely marvelous, and heart transplantation is truly a gift. It really remains the gold standard treatment for people who reach that end stage of heart failure. Our problem is that even as good as it is, we still only get 2,000 hearts a year across the entire United States.
The limited number of healthy organs and the vast number of patients created a dire need for artificial hearts. Dr. James Long joined the Baptist Medical Center 2 years ago and has been working with the Nazih Zuhdi Transplant Institute.
These devices actually get shoehorned into the body almost and go into a space underneath the rib cage, connecting to the heart and bringing the blood back to the aorta to take the blood out to the body. These are pulsing pumps, and so they have a diaphragm inside of them that moves back and forth with every beat. Because of that, they have to be big. They also have valves in them to make sure that the blood flows in one direction all the way through all the time.
The artificial hearts can improve and extend the lives of patients who cannot receive or are not candidates for heart transplants. However, the first-generation devices were large and had a short shelf life. Recently, Dr. Long developed a new generation of artificial hearts. A device called LevaCore is smaller than its predecessor and hopefully will last longer. Instead of multiple moving parts, the levacore contains just one rotor that floats and allows for a smoother flow of blood. This video news release demonstrates how the device operates.
The design here allows for very smooth flow of blood so that there's less likelihood of having clots and less likelihood of having the need for blood thinner and anticoagulation, and therefore complications related to that, like bleeding, for example.
The levacore heart is currently in clinical trials. It is Dr. Long's hope that the technology of artificial hearts will one day achieve and surpass the level of current tissue transplants.
We know that as we get to earlier stage patients who have less risk, that we ought to see better outcomes. And so in some centers, we're seeing outcomes that are already starting to approach transplantation. And some of the work that we've been involved in has given us a real great expectation that we can get there.
While improvements continue to be made in the world of cardiovascular surgery, doctors say the key to helping their patients is education.
It's one thing to replace the heart when it reaches end stage and it's all worn out and you can't do anything but replace the heart. But wouldn't it be neat if we could find ways of preventing people from getting to that state?
We still see about a third of our patients die that are waiting for an organ, never get an organ. So still we have a long ways to go in terms of education and getting people comfortable with the idea of giving organs.